The wind howled, hurling snow into Anna's face with such force that she could barely see her own hands. A woman stood at the entrance to an abandoned mine, clutching the hand of her 5-year-old daughter behind them. Down by the village, laughter rang out loud, cruel, mocking. People had gathered to watch the spectacle. How a widow with a child was being driven out into nowhere at the very threshold of winter. Anna looked at the black void in the mountainside then. At Liza the girl trembled, pressing against her chest her only toy, a worn rag doll. Her lips were blue from the cold, her small fingers had turned white. There was no choice. Anna stepped into the darkness. 3 months ago, Mikhail went into the forest for wood and didn't return. A strong, experienced lumberjack. He knew these woods like the back of his hand, but an old pine fell the wrong way one moment, and Anna was left alone with a small daughter in her arms. Her husband's parents met her at the threshold with stone faces. Her father-in-law, not looking her in the eyes, said that the house was needed for another son who would soon marry, that she was no longer family, that it was time to leave. Anna went around the entire village, knocking on every door. Doors closed one after another. Someone silently turned away. Someone said they had enough mouths to feed. Someone openly laughed. Who needs a widow with a child in winter? Old woman Daria, whom Anna once helped in the garden, peeked through a crack and quickly closed the door with a bolt. Blacksmith Stepan, whose daughter Anna had delivered during a difficult birth, pretended not to hear the knocking. Neighbor Marfa, with whom she used to wash clothes at the river together, turned away and went deep into the house. On the 11th day of wandering, she saw an old coal mine abandoned more than 20 years ago. When the coal ran out, nobody went there. People said it was dangerous inside, dark and cold, that the spirits of dead miners dwelled there, that the tunnels could collapse at any moment. But Anna had no options left. When she and Liza began dragging their few belongings to the mine, the whole village came running to gawk. Men leaned against fences, smirking. Women shook their heads, whispering. Children threw snowballs and shouted offensive words. Anna was called a mole. They said only worms and the dead live underground, that with a child in the mine, they wouldn't last even a week. A red-bearded man shouted the loudest, telling her to at least take a lantern, or she'd smash her nose against a wall. In the darkness, the crowd burst into laughter after each of his jokes. He was the village's chief mocker, sharp-tongued and merciless to others' misfortunes. Young guys made bets. How many days would the widow and the girl last? Someone said 3 days, someone a week. The most optimistic bet on 10 days. Everyone laughed, discussing the terms of the wager. Anna didn't turn around. She carried bundles of rags, a pot, an axe, a bundle of firewood. Silently, jaw clenched, her back was straight, her steps firm. She took Liza by the hand and disappeared into the black maw of the mine. The laughter echoed off the stone walls and dissolved somewhere in the depths of the tunnels. Inside, there was such darkness that Anna at first just stood, not daring to move. She lit a candle. A weak flame illuminated a few meters of damp stone corridor. The walls glistened with moisture. Water dripped from the ceiling, each drop echoing hollowly. The air was heavy, saturated with the smell of earth and rot. Liza pressed against her mother, crying soundlessly. Anna hugged her daughter with one arm, holding the candle in the other. Slowly moved forward. Each step echoed in the silence. Small pebbles crunched underfoot. Somewhere in the depths, the sound of water could be heard. The first 3 days were a trial. Anna explored the mine meter by meter, afraid of getting lost, afraid of collapse, afraid of the darkness that squeezed her throat. She found old rails, a rusty cart, broken tools. The tunnel went deep under the mountain, branching into many passages. One path led to a pile of stones, another led to an underground stream from which water could be taken, the third to a small cave with a relatively flat floor and high ceiling. Here Anna decided to set up living quarters. She carried out stones, cleared the floor, built a hearth from flat boulders, installing it so smoke would go out through a natural crack in the vault. Lit the first fire, and for the first time in many days felt warmth. Liza sat by the fire, wrapped in all the rags they had. Her big eyes didn't leave the dancing flames. The girl stopped shivering for the first time in several days. Something resembling peace appeared on her face. The village didn't leave them alone. Every few days someone came to the mine, not to help, but to laugh, to check if those two were still alive. When Anna went out for brushwood or water from the external source, she was met with sarcastic remarks. They asked if she'd changed her mind about crawling out into the light. They were interested in whether the girl had gotten sick in the damp hole. The red-bearded man was especially diligent. He invented new jokes, said that soon Anna would grow claws for digging, that the girl would grow whiskers like a mole, that they'd both go blind from the darkness. Anna was silent, learned not to answer, not to show pain. Every morning, she woke up in the darkness of the cave, lit the fire, prepared meager food from flour remnants and dried mushrooms. Every day, she descended deeper into the mine, exploring new tunnels, and found old tools, picks, shovels, crowbars, forgotten coal supplies in distant corners, whole deposits of black stone that burned long, and hot wooden beams that could be used to reinforce walls and create partitions. In one of the block passages, she discovered an entire warehouse, barrels, boxes, old blankets, and oiled cloth. Anna was not a weak woman. She grew up in a family where girls were taught to work on equal terms with boys. She knew how to handle an axe, saw, hammer. Her father was a carpenter, and she had helped him since childhood. Her hands were strong, accustomed to labor. She began to build. A week passed, then another. Anna constructed a wooden door at the entrance to their cave, so heat wouldn't escape, reinforced the ceiling with beams. Fearing collapse, made beds from boards and old blankets, organized a firewood storage near the underground stream, where it was cool and humid, so the wood wouldn't dry out. From old boards, she crafted a table and 2 benches, found rusty nails, cleaned them, straightened them, made shelves along the walls for supplies, built a primitive but working ventilation system, digging a small channel to one of the natural cracks in the vault. Liza helped as she could, brought small pebbles for the hearth, collected wood chips for kindling, watched the fire when her mother went into the distant tunnels. The girl turned out to be clever, quickly memorized all the main passages, learned to distinguish the sounds of dripping water from different sources. The girl stopped crying, learned to walk in the darkness, navigating by touch and by the sounds of dripping water, no longer feared the mine. It had become her home. Anna discovered that underground, the temperature hardly changed in their cave. Stable warmth from the hearth was maintained. The stone walls preserved it. There was no wind, no snow, only darkness, silence, and safety. She began to understand the rhythm of underground life, knew when the water in the stream rose. When it fell, noticed that in one of the tunnels there was always a light draft, meaning there was an exit to the surface, albeit a distant one. Found a place where the walls were covered with strange glowing lichens. Their faint glow was enough to make out the outline of the passage. On the surface, cold weather began. November brought the first serious frosts. The village heated stoves day and night, using up wood supplies. And Anna collected brushwood in the forest near the mine methodically. Day after day, stacked them in neat wood piles in one of the distant tunnels, stored as much as she could carry, chopped down dry trees, sawed them into pieces, dragged them into the mine. People from the village saw her, laughed, said she was like an ant dragging twigs, that she'd freeze anyway, that she wouldn't have enough firewood for winter. Anna continued to work. By the end of November, she had 3 huge wood piles in different tunnels, enough to heat all winter with some leftover. In early December, she stumbled upon something unexpected in the most distant branch of the mine. Beyond 2 blockages that had to be partially dismantled, she discovered an old storage room. Apparently, the miners kept supplies here in case of long work underground. Sacks of flour, damp, but not completely spoiled. The top layer in the sacks had hardened, but inside the flour was quite usable. Jars of salt, dried meat, and sealed boxes, even several bottles of oil. There were other finds too: ropes, candles, a kerosene lamp, flint, and steel. Anna stood before these treasures, holding a torch, and for the first time in 2 months felt tears running down her cheeks, tears of relief, tears of gratitude to those long-gone miners who left these supplies. They would survive. They would definitely survive the winter. She transferred everything to her cave, distributed the supplies, calculated how long it would last if they economized. They'd make it to spring if things got really tight. They could stretch it even to summer. Liza helped arrange the supplies in the corners. Her mother prepared real food for the first time in a long time. Soup with meat and thick porridge. They ate silently, sitting by the fire, and this was the most satisfying dinner in many weeks. That evening, Anna allowed herself to relax a little, told Liza a fairy tale that she had once heard from her father. The girl fell asleep with a smile, tightly hugging her rag doll. December approached its end. The village lived its usual life. Men chopped wood, women prepared food, children played in the snow. Sometimes someone remembered the widow in the mine and chuckled, wondering if she was still alive or had already frozen there with her girl. Some even bet on it. The red-bearded man insisted they were definitely dead. It had been too long since anyone had seen them. Others doubted. Said they'd seen smoke from a ventilation crack on the slope. Nobody checked, nobody cared. On December 23rd, the sky darkened, the wind changed. Blew from the north. Sharp and cruel. Old people who remembered harsh winters became worried, said something serious was approaching, that such a sky happens once in half a century, that they needed to prepare for the worst. But nobody really listened. Winter is winter. Frosts are frosts. Will survive, as always. On the 24th, a blizzard began. Not an ordinary winter storm, a real hurricane, the likes of which hadn't been seen in these parts for more than 50 years. The wind howled so loud it drowned out any sound. Snow fell in a wall, turning day into night. Outside the windows was a solid white haze. Visibility dropped to zero. Temperature plummeted to -30, then even lower. The village closed itself in houses, hoping to wait it out. The storm intensified. The wind tore off shutters. Snow packed into every crack. Chimneys howled and whistled in some houses. Stoves began to smoke. The wind blew into the chimneys with such force that the draft reversed. In the mine, Anna heard the howl of the wind outside. The sound came from far away, muffled by the thickness of stone. She approached the wooden door she had installed at the entrance to the tunnel. Cold seeped through the cracks, not strong, but noticeable. Anna took old blankets, caulked all the gaps, hung another layer of fabric over the door, returned to the cave, threw firewood into the hearth, checked the supplies. There was enough of everything. Hugged Liza. Outside, the elements raged. Inside, a fire burned, warm, calm, reliable. The blizzard continued for 3 days. 3 days when the world above turned into an icy hell. The wind tore off roofs, snow buried houses up to the windows, and in some places even higher. Temperature dropped to -40, then to -45. In the village, problems began. Stoves went out due to strong wind in the chimneys. People tried to light them again, but the wind was merciless. Firewood ran out faster than expected. In such frost, they had to heat twice, 3 times more than usual. Food supplies stored in cold entryways turned into icy blocks, impossible to cook. At blacksmith Stepan's, the roof collapsed under the weight of snow. The family barely managed to jump out. The house became uninhabitable. At old woman Daria's, the stovepipe burst. Smoke went into the hut. They had to put out the fire and freeze. In several families, water in the wells froze. Ice bound the water to a depth of several meters. People tried to help each other, but the frost was merciless. Everyone barely coped with their own troubles. On the 3rd day of the blizzard, Marfa's house ran out of firewood. The woman began burning furniture, first old chairs, then benches, then the table went into the stove. On the 4th day, the wind died down. Silence descended. Even more terrible than the howl of the storm, the frost strengthened. -45. The village lay under a 3-meter layer of snow, resembling a cemetery. Houses stood dark. Almost no smoke came from chimneys. Almost no firewood remained for anyone. Food was running out. Stoves were heated sparingly, a couple of hours a day, just to not freeze completely. People wrapped themselves in everything they had and still shivered. Children cried from cold. Their lips turned blue. Fingers went numb. Old people fell ill. Coughing, fever, aching bones. Several people had already taken to bed and couldn't get up. Several families gathered in one house to combine heat and supplies, but it helped little. Cold penetrated through walls, through blankets, through clothes. The village was slowly dying. On the 5th day after the blizzard, the red-bearded man who had once laughed the loudest at Anna said what everyone was thinking but feared to say aloud. They needed to go to the mine, check if anyone was alive there, and if there was, ask for help. They objected. How could they ask the one they had mocked? How could they humiliate themselves to such a degree? It's shameful disgrace for the whole village. But the cold left no choice. Children were crying. Old people were dying. Supplies had run out. Pride or life? The choice was obvious. A group of 5 people struggled through the snow to the mine. It was hard to walk. Snowdrifts reached the waist, and in places even the chest. The frost burned their faces. Breath turned into icy crystals on beards and eyelashes, but they walked because in the village there was no hope left. The red-bearded man walked first, breaking the trail behind him. Blacksmith Stepan, then 2 young men. The group was closed by Marfa, the only woman who dared to go. They approached the entrance. Snow here was cleared. A neat path led to the wooden door. Someone's shovel had recently worked. At the entrance to the mine lay a freshly cut branch, not yet covered with snow. meaning someone had recently gone out for firewood. They were alive despite everything. The red-bearded man knocked on the wooden door that closed the entrance to the tunnel, knocked uncertainly, quietly, like a person who has no right to ask, but is forced to. A few seconds of silence, then the sound of footsteps from inside, the creak of a bolt. The door opened. On the threshold stood Anna, face thin but calm, cheeks pink, meaning it was warm inside, hands covered in abrasions and calluses, traces of hard work, hair gathered in a simple, not dressed in warm, though patched clothes. Behind her back, from the depths of the tunnel, warmth emanated, the warmth of a real fire, living, saving warmth. The red-bearded man opened his mouth, wanted to say something, couldn't find words, just stood, feeling the frost grip his face, while life wafted from the mine. Anna looked at them, at those very people who had laughed, who had called her a mole, who said she and her daughter wouldn't last even a week at Stepan, who had refused her help at Marfa, who had turned away from her, at the red-bearded man who had invented offensive jokes. She could slam the door, could say they were to blame, could recall every offensive word, every chuckle, every thrown snowball. Her face remained calm. There was neither anger nor triumph in her eyes, only fatigue and something else. Understanding that these people came not from pride, but from desperation. Instead of words, Anna stepped aside, opened the door wider with a gesture, invited them to enter. People entered, and warmth met them, real, living, precious warmth in the cave that Anna had arranged. A bright fire burned along the walls, stood neat stacks of firewood, tins, hundreds of logs. In the corner lay food supplies, sacks of flour, jars, dried meat, dried herbs hung, bunches of onions. A large pot with hot soup stood, steam rising from it. On the walls hung tools, axe, saw, hammer. On the shelves stood candles. Spare blankets lay. In another corner was a child's bed, neat and clean. Liza sat by the fire on a homemade bench, covered with a blanket. She looked at the strangers with huge eyes. In the girl's hands was a piece of bread with honey. The 5 villagers stood rooted to the spot, looked at this underground home, at the fire, at the supplies, at the woman who had survived where, in their opinion, survival was impossible. Moreover, she hadn't just survived, she had created a real shelter here, safe and warm. Marfa sobbed. The red-bearded man swallowed a lump in his throat. Stepan lowered his eyes. The red-bearded man gathered his courage. His voice trembled, from cold, from shame, from desperation. He asked for forgiveness, said he had been a fool, that they had all been fools, that they had mocked the only smart person in the village. Then said the village was freezing, that children were crying from cold, that their lips were turning blue, that old people were sick and weakening, that firewood had run out, food had frozen, stoves weren't being heated, that roofs had collapsed, pipes had burst. Asked for help, not for himself, for the children, for the old people, for those who weren't guilty of others' stupidity and cruelty. Anna listened silently. Her face showed no emotion. Then she looked at Liza. The girl looked at her mother with her big eyes and slowly nodded, a small, barely noticeable movement of her head. Anna turned to the people, said briefly, "Go and bring everyone who needs, old people first, children, the sick, pregnant women, let them come. There is warmth here, there is food, there is room for everyone." By evening, a procession of people stretched to the mine. First came families with small children. Mothers carried infants in their arms, wrapped in everything they had. Older children trudged on their own, holding their parents' hands. Then old people, who were led by the arm, supported from both sides. Then everyone else. The village was relocating underground. Everyone carried what they could, some a bundle of clothes, some food remnants, some blankets, some tools. The procession moved slowly, struggling through the snow with difficulty. Anna met everyone at the entrance, showed where they could settle, distributed blankets from her supplies, pointed to the pot with soup. "Take, eat. There's enough for everyone if it runs out. I'll cook more." She cooked soup in a large pot. Fortunately, there were enough supplies in the old storage room. She added flour, dried meat, salt. Simple but satisfying food resulted. People filled the main cave, settled in neighboring tunnels that Anna indicated as safe, lit additional fires in places where she allowed, where smoke could escape through natural cracks in the vault. Men helped arrange new places, brought firewood from Anna's supplies, laid stones for hearths, stretched blankets between walls, creating something like rooms for families. Women helped with food, fed children, cared for sick old people. Underground became crowded, noisy from many voices, stuffy from people and fire, but warm, alive, safe. Children stopped crying for the first time in several days. They were warm, ate warm food, some even laughed. Children's laughter echoed off the stone walls with a strange echo. Old people warmed up, coughing became quieter. One grandfather who could barely move in his cold hut drank hot soup and fell asleep by the fire. Covered with a warm blanket, his face smoothed out. For the first time in days, there was no grimace of pain on it. People ate for the first time in several days. Simple soup seemed like a feast. Someone fell asleep right by the fire, exhausted from the ordeal. Anna walked among the people, checked if everyone had enough space, threw firewood into the fires, brought water from the underground stream in buckets and jugs, made sure smoke didn't accumulate, that ventilation worked. Liza helped her mother, brought blankets to those who shivered, showed children where they could play and where it was better not to go. The little girl became a guide in this underground world. The red-bearded man stopped Anna, extended his hand. Rough, weathered, trembling not from cold but from emotion. He said nothing, just stood, and in his eyes was gratitude and shame, deep, burning shame for everything he had said, for every joke, for every chuckle. Anna shook his hand firmly, briefly nodded, then let go and moved on. She still needed to bring water, throw more firewood, check the distant tunnels. The frost held for another 2 weeks. The village above stood empty, covered with snow. Dead houses darkened with window openings, roofs, broken chimneys, destroyed snow lay in huge drifts. And underground, life continued. People shared what little they had brought with them, pooled supplies. One family brought a sack of peas, another, some lard, a third, a jar of honey. Everything went into the common pot. Men went up for firewood when the frost receded a bit to -30, worked quickly to avoid frostbite, cut down dry trees not far from the mine, brought them down in armfuls, sawed, chopped, stacked in tunnels. Women cooked food for everyone, boiled soups, porridges, baked flatbreads on hot stones by the fire, washed clothes in the cold water of the underground stream, cared for the sick. Children played in the tunnels, their laughter echoed off the stone walls. They invented games in the darkness. Hide and seek, tag, counting games. Liza taught them how to navigate by sounds, how to find the way back. Anna showed the men where to get coal from old deposits. There was enough for a long time. It burned hotter than wood, and longer. Taught how to properly arrange hearths so smoke would go up through cracks and not accumulate below. Showed all the hiding places she had found during months of exploring the mine, explained which tunnels were safe and which were better not to enter due to collapse risk. The mine became a village underground, strange, but alive. Each family had its own corner, its own small fire, its own space, separated by blankets or simply conditional. People stopped laughing at Anna. Now they looked at her with respect, with reverence. This thin woman with calloused hands and tired eyes had saved them all. She, who had been kicked out of her home, she, who had been mocked, she, who should have frozen by their calculations. And she survived, prepared, gathered supplies, created a shelter, and saved the life of the entire village. Old woman Daria, who had once closed the door in Anna's face, now sat by the fire and cried from shame. Stepan, who had turned away from the widow in a difficult hour, now worked more than anyone, chopped wood, carried water, reinforced vaults, trying somehow to atone for guilt. Marfa helped Anna prepare food, worked silently, side by side. Once Marfa quietly said, "Forgive me." Anna nodded. No more words were needed. In mid-January, the frost retreated. Temperature rose to -20. Then to -10. Snow began to melt little by little under rare sun rays. The village above slowly returned to life. People began to disperse to their homes, to repair roofs, clear snow, restore stoves. There was much work, but now they worked together, helped each other. That common misfortune they had experienced underground changed something in the village. Anna was seen off with gratitude. Everyone brought something as a sign of appreciation, some a sack of flour, some a bundle of firewood, some tools, a new axe, a sharp saw. Some just bowed silently, not finding words. Children ran to say goodbye to Liza, hugged her, promised to come visit. The girl stood at the entrance to the mine and waved after them. The father-in-law came last. The old man stood for a long time at the entrance to the mine, not daring to enter, then finally crossed the threshold, walked through the tunnel into the cave where Anna was folding things. Said the house was hers, that she could return whenever she wanted, that Liza was his granddaughter, blood of his blood, that he had been wrong, that he asked forgiveness. The old man's voice trembled. He didn't cry. Old men don't cry, but his eyes were moist. Anna looked at him for a long time, remembered that day when he had kicked her out, the coldness of his words, the indifference in his eyes. Then shook her head, said calmly, without anger, "Thank you, but we will stay here. The mine has become our home. Underground it's calm, warm and safe here. No one will kick us out. Here is our place. But the doors are always open for those who need. If there's trouble, come. There will always be warmth and food for everyone here." The father-in-law nodded, couldn't find what to answer, put a large sack of grain and a second with beans at the entrance, turned and left. Hunched, he seemed older than he was. Spring came early that year. Snow melted quickly. Streams babbled. The village came alive. People began to restore what was destroyed. Roofs were repaired together. Stoves were built together. They helped each other. They remembered the terrible winter, the blizzard, the frosts, and how they were saved by a woman living underground. Anna and Liza stayed in the mine, arranged it even better during spring and summer, made several separate rooms, a bedroom, kitchen, pantry, installed better ventilation, digging additional channels, reinforced the vaults with thick beams, created a real underground home. Even installed something like plumbing, wooden troughs through which water from the stream flowed into a special cistern in the kitchen, made a primitive but functional filtration system. Neighbors came to help, brought tools, materials, food, no longer out of pity, but out of respect and gratitude. Men helped drag logs. Women brought preserves, jam, dried mushrooms. Sometimes neighbors just came to visit, brought news from the surface, fresh bread, treats for Liza. Sat by the fire, drank herbal tea, talked. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody called Anna a mole. Called her savior, wise woman, the one who knows how to survive when the world above collapses. The red-bearded man became the most frequent guest, came to help with heavy work, once brought a toy for Liza. A horse carved from wood. The girl was delighted. He smiled. For the first time his smile was kind, without a shadow of mockery. Liza grew up in the mine by 7 years old. She knew these tunnels better than anyone, even better than her mother could walk in complete darkness, without stumbling, distinguished every sound, every smell. This was her world. Helped her mother receive rare travelers who got lost in bad weather. For such people, the mine door was always open in winter. When blizzards happened, frozen travelers came here. Anna let everyone in, fed them, let them spend the night by the fire. Anna often stood at the entrance to the mine, looking at the village below, remembered that November day when she was kicked out, the laughter of the crowd, the cold backs of neighbors, snowballs thrown by children, the offensive words of the red-bearded man. And her choice, to step into the darkness when the whole world turned away, not to give up, not to break, to survive in spite of everything. That darkness turned out to be salvation, not only for her and Liza, for the whole village, for those very people who laughed. She held no grudge. Anger is a heavy burden that pulls you down. Anna let it go there, underground, in the long nights by the fire, forgave, not because they deserved forgiveness, but because she herself deserved peace. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, when Liza slept and the fire crackled softly, Anna thought about Mikhail, wondered what he would say seeing their underground home. Would he be proud of his wife and daughter? Probably yes. He always said Anna was the strongest woman he knew. She turned out to be even stronger than he thought, stronger than she herself thought. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, don't forget to put a like and subscribe to the channel. Write in the comments what city you're from. I'm very interested where my audience is watching me from. The story is fictional. Any coincidences are accidental. Thank you for being with me.